Hey, well, welcome to the channel. My name is Cal, better known as Riskman. And if you're an entry-level IT audit, GRC, or cybersecurity professional, this is a channel for you because here's where we decode all of that complex terminology and everything and break it down into easy to understand language for you to digest and improve and excel in your career. This channel is mainly for the entry-level GRC, IT audit, and cybersecurity professional. And so you'll have a lot of information here that's going to be very useful for you. But today's topic is going to be on how to write a risk. Now this is very important because most entry-level and even experienced GRC, IT audit, and cybersecurity professionals don't really have a grasp on this process. I'm going to go ahead and show you why it's important to write risk and know how to write a risk and where it all originates from. And we want to show you how to actually articulate those risks to your senior management as well. So when creating an enterprise risk, you ask yourself, well, why am I creating an enterprise risk to begin with? Well, there's 5 reasons why you want to create an enterprise risk. One of them is you want to test your risk management strategy of the organization. Creating these risks allow you to test your company's ability to identify and assess risk and mitigate those risks as well. The second reason is that you want to identify any vulnerabilities that you might have in your organization. And by creating risk, you can identify any weaknesses or in your systems or your processes and that the real world threats could exploit. And that's really key. The third reason that you want to create enterprise risk is to improve your risk response capabilities. Now, this is really key because creating risk can help you develop and refine your incident response plans. And because you know what the risks are, you are better, more equipped to handle the response as well. And lastly, the fifth thing is you want to ensure your company's risk register addresses current identified risks and those that may be emerging as well. And I think I hit number 4, but number 5 is actually this. And this is really key to the process as well. You want to foster a culture of risk awareness. Now, this is really key. And by creating risk, you can raise the awareness of your risk management throughout your organization. And this will help you better define where the risks are. And one thing that's really important is establishing a risk universe. Hey, before we get started, I have to change.
Using the risk matrix diffuser, Cal becomes Riskman.
Okay, so I look at writing a risk as a 3-layer process. One at the top layer is the identification of the risk. Then you want to create a risk title. And then lastly, you want to create the risk description. And this is very key to the process because you want to be able to identify, what the risk actually is. And so you can make a clear delineation of what it is you're going to write about. So on the identification layer, let's look at that for a minute. So there's 3 components of the risk identification layer. One of them is the threat, and this is the potential source of harm, or negative impact that could go through the organization. It could be a natural disaster, it could be a security breach, a market downturn, or any of those type of events like that. The second one is vulnerabilities. And a lot of times we think of vulnerabilities always in the security engineering or security posture of the organization, but there's vulnerabilities throughout the organization. And risks are actually, you have vulnerabilities not only from outside threats, but inside threats as well. And this is where weakness or susceptibility in your systems, processes, or organization that have a threat could exploit. And that's why this is really important as well. The third is actually the impact. So this is the potential negative consequences, if you will, of a threat exploiting a vulnerability. It could be financial loss. It could be damage to a reputation of the company, or operational disruption, something of that nature as well. Okay, so let's look at layer 2. So layer 2, when you're creating the risk title, and this is where a lot of people get tripped up and they get confused and everything and don't know where to begin. The title should be, short in nature, but it should be concise, it should be direct, and it should be descriptive. And I'll give you an example, something like if you have a vague title would be something like, well, the supply chain disruption. That really tells you nothing about the risk. But if you say something more specific, like delayed shipments of critical X components due to supplier bankruptcy, something like that, then that gives a more clarity around the actual risk title. And that's how you create your title. So you want in your title, you want to be concise, you want to be direct, and you want to be descriptive. So you want clarity in that first layer of when you're creating the risk title. The next thing you want to create in that title is specificity. So when I said delayed shipments of what? Critical X components, that specifies where the delay was and that there is a delayed shipment of X components. So you want to be specific right there. You want to identify, clearly state the risk, and then you want to quantify if possible. Sometimes you can't, but sometimes you can quantify in a numerical sense, like it may lead to $2 million losses and blah, 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 something like that. Most of the time, you don't have to quantify in the title. So don't get so hung up on creating your title. You want to be more specific and clearly state what the issue is. You want to also prioritize. So you want to indicate the risk severity. So in that, where I said due to critical X components due to supplier bankruptcy. Well, supplier bankruptcy is a priority right there. So you want to be really, really clear, excuse me, and specific when you're actually creating your title. The other thing you want to do is you want to be relevant, the relevance to the risk. You want to address that in the title. So the title should align with what the actual impact is, which you're going to establish in your statement. And this doesn't have to be a long, drawn-out statement. Your risk should be title should be like a sentence or less, if you can. So with the relevance, you want to ensure that the title aligns with the risk itself, the context of the risk, the impact, that should be highlighted in there, and then any stakeholders that may be involved, like if for instance, on the risk I mentioned, supplier bankruptcy. So that's the thing that you want to do on that second layer. Once you create that title, then we go into the description, because creating that title will lead you to the description. So with the description, the description also needs clarity, specificity, and relevance. And that should be included in the description as well. However, along with that, you want to have the details in there. So the cause is in the details. You want to describe, the root cause in the details. And this is something that we'll get into later on with the findings, because findings will consist of root cause as well. So if you have a risk that is relative to a finding, then those two components are going to be baked into there. You also want to look at the likelihood of this probability of the risk actually happening and everything. And we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of how to rate these risks as well, because that's important as well when you're actually creating these risks. So we'll get into that a little down the road, but this is just how to structure the risk itself. And then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of rating the risk. But you have to have the detail in there to address what is actually going on in the risk so it can be clearly articulated to upper management. So how do we put it all together? Well, as I mentioned, the first step to writing a risk is a risk statement in general is to identify the risk you want to describe. This may involve a reviewing project or business plans, assessing any risk or brainstorming potential risks that may be out there. The risk should be specific and should focus on a particular threat rather than a general idea. And that's what a lot of people do. They put these general ideas out there, or they mix a finding with a risk. And those are two different things. Finding is more so this is what happened. A risk is more so of this is what could happen if we don't have certain controls in that in place. So an example would be a risk title would be something like PI, PHI, and customer data is/could be compromised within application X. And that is the risk statement right there. So then you create your risk description off of that, and that would be something more or less on the lines of loss of personal identifiable information. And you see in the risk description, I'm actually defining the acronym right there. And that's one thing that a lot of people don't do. We all, as GRC analysts, know what PI and PHI means. PI meaning personal identifiable information, and PHI being personal health information. But it's good to really define these things when you're actually writing a risk. And because somebody that's looking at this for the first time may not know what PHI is. So if you look at this risk here, it tells you basically what is actually the problem and where the root cause is, and then it tells you here what the outcome is, which in this case may result in potential exposure of data loss due to deficiencies in planning or product technology, and so forth. And so you need to really spell this out. You need to spell this out because this is very important that you be more or very descriptive in this. You don't have to write a full paragraph or anything like that, but the risk must really state the details of what's actually being compromised and why. And as I mentioned here, always define your acronyms where you can, because when you do this, it really gives more meat behind what you're actually saying. And people that may not understand these acronyms, because I know in IT we do that a lot. We use a ton of acronyms, and this really breaks down things to let people understand exactly what's being compromised and what's going on, instead of throwing all these acronyms out like here's the PHI, the PI, the PCP, and all this other stuff. You really explain what's going on, because when you're having conversations with upper management, this stuff is really important, because a lot of upper management may not be very versed on these things because they have a lot of things going on. And this really just actually gives them one less thing that they have to decipher. Don't forget, and I'll put a link in the description, that I have a book out. It's called Code Defend Disrupt, and it's a guide for cybersecurity professionals, entry level. This book is written for entry level cybersecurity professionals. I'll put a link down in the description and let you know where you can get it. You can get it on Amazon. The Kindle version is $9.99 and the paperback is $21.99. So with that being said, I hope to see you back here soon. Until then, this is Riskman, and I'm out.